The world is constantly changing, and change brings about questions. Is that right? Can this be true? In order to determine the truth, we must look at the Bible in its original context. The Old Testament, specifically Genesis, was written to the ancient Hebrews. It has been debated whether Genesis is a literal history or more of a story that presents images for the people of Israel. It seems the whole Bible is a story, and we must read everything as such, not for each minute detail, but for how each detail points towards the overarching theme. So what was Genesis' story to the Israelites? Walton, in his book, The Lost World of Adam and Eve, presents some ideas for us. He has us look at the story itself to find out what the story has to tell us. In chapter 1 and 2 of Genesis, we look at the story of creation. However, if taken literally, it offers us our first conflict. It seems that there are two creation stories. Did man exist before the creation of Adam and Eve in chapter 2? If we look at it like a story, then chapter 2 is just a focus on mankind's special creation, rather than a second creation following the first 7 days in chapter 1. Then why go to all that trouble for 7 days of creation when he could have made everything and then made man, making him even more set apart? Could it have been that it was a representation of something to the Israelites that they would have understood at their time? It is. The process of the 7-day creation reflects the process in which a temple is dedicated. Day 7, in a sense, is the day when God first came to earth. In this week of creation, God is preparing a sacred place. Not just a nice garden where animals live, plants grow, and humans thrive, but a resting place, a center of worship to God. If this is the story, then we must ask, what is Adam's and Eve's role in all of this? Looking back at Genesis 1 and 2, we must consider, was Adam one of a kind? Looking at the words of the ancient text, we see Adam is used both as a single name with an article, but also in a plural sense, referring to a group of people. Although we like to believe that Adam is the sole start of the entire human race, there is no solid objection to the idea that Adam could have simply been a man set apart as God's priest in this Eden. The same is said for Eve. Adam was assigned to naming the animals and to maintaining the order in creation. But what about the specific creation account of Adam being formed from dust and Eve being taken from his side? We look again at the story. Does the dust of the earth that Adam was formed out of actually refer to dirt? Or does it mean mortality? Does his creation represent one man's, or maybe a race? And does Eve's creation mean Adam is short one rib? Or have we misinterpreted the Bible? It seems more likely, looking at the original text, that Eve being taken from the side represents Eve as a completion to Adam. Together they can more effectively and more efficiently complete the task God had for them. Of course, they probably didn't have much to do if the world God had just created was good. Wrong. If we look back at the creation, seeing it as a process to create a sacred place, then maybe the good that God uses to describe his creation doesn't refer to perfection. Maybe good was referring to the functionality of his creation. But how can God create something imperfect? That's the thing. God created everything from the Garden of Eden, a place of order, to the dark stormy seas, an event of chaos. And he is God over all of it. In that sense, it is perfect and under God's control. But with God's sovereignty at hand, how can we look at the fall? Adam and Eve were living in this ordered garden. They were God's priests and ambassadors of his image. How could God allow Satan to come and tempt them? We must look at the original text. We know God told Adam not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Eve apparently believes, or is led to believe, they are not allowed to touch it. Now when this serpent, a creature created by God, comes up to them, we all think, it's Satan. But there's not solid justification for that. If this is truly a story, then the serpent would have had no marking of evil to the ancient Israelites. In fact, the serpent hardly even tricks Eve, but rather points out her fallacy in thought. Even looking at the serpent's curses that God bestows upon him, we see them mirrored in the ancient texts during the time of the Israelites, encouraging the idea of Genesis being a story that took unimaginable concepts and presented them to a nation in a form that they could relate to and comprehend. Therefore, we must take it upon ourselves to question our paradigms. Are we projecting our realities on an unknown history? We can't ignore the fact that Genesis was written to the Israelites of ancient times. Knowing that, we shouldn't stress over modern discoveries and ancient texts. God is still the creator of the universe, and everything was ordered by God to do its function. As we search and discover, it should strengthen our faith, as we add to the story that God has written.